Did you see the latest with RFK? Are you caught up on that? I saw he had put out some video a couple days ago, and he was talking about how when Trump wins, he's going to put him in charge of the FDA and the health department and I don't know. He listed like 12 things, and I don't know how serious the offer was or what's legit or what would actually happen. But it's really scary because that dude is like legit nuts. I mean, I'm sure you've heard all the stories, like stuff that he admits, like the cut off whale head, like driving with that on his car, like the killing the bear and putting it in Central Park, all this weird stuff, the brain. I mean, there's just so much, and he like believes in every conspiracy theory. Like his what they just said, or I just read a little bit ago. His like day one plan, and it's supposedly backed by Trump, is getting rid of fluoride in the water because of that well-known conspiracy. The guy's a nut job, and he's like responsible for actual deaths. I believe it was in Samoa where he campaigned with. He's got a bunch of organizations. He was known for a long time for some good stuff, some environmentalism and stuff like that. But he. There's a really good podcast called Behind the Bastards that did a profile of him, and he's done a lot of weird and crazy stuff over the years, but some good stuff too, mostly bad. But the history of him is insane. In Samoa, one of his organizations campaigned real hard against, I believe it was the MMR vaccine, and they got it to where it was like pulled from being mandatory. And like within just a very short amount of time, I don't remember exactly how long it is, they had a measles outbreak that led to like 70 deaths or something like that. And they immediately made it mandatory again. And like that blood is basically on his hands. And this guy wants to, or Trump wants to put this guy in charge of health organizations. I don't know what he's really offered him or what would really happen, but that's really scary.
RFK is a very interesting figure. I kind of don't know where he came from. I mean, obviously, we know he came from the Kennedy family. I wasn't that aware of him before all of this. I know that he was, he's been in the comedy world. Even Sam Seder talks about how he used to know him. And there's a lot of people in Hollywood that just like, know this guy and have known of this guy, I guess similar to Trump. And maybe that's why he's like taking this opportunity. I see him as just like a fully just like empty shell because, his whole election grift was to try to break off as many undecided voters as he could and then use that leverage to try to like leverage his way into a cabinet position. I know that he almost certainly would have preferred for Kamala to have bitten on that, because if Kamala had guaranteed him a spot in the cabinet, then he probably would have gotten it. Whereas like with Trump, it's funny to me that he thinks he's actually going to have a spot in the Trump cabinet. I mean, I think it's purely going to come down to how much of a fighter he is, because that's what it was with the last Trump administration. It's like you had all these people in play, and basically the dynamics seemed to be that if they could keep the attention off of themselves, then they can kind of continue doing their work. Like one of few people in the Trump administration who never seemed to face any resistance or controversy from Trump himself at all was Stephen Miller. It never really seemed like Stephen Miller's position was threatened. He just, Trump seemed to be happy with the work that Stephen Miller was doing, which was, diligently trying to create, legal precedent for immigrants to be ripped apart from their families, and just like the most vicious immigration policy possible. And Trump just like really liked that about him. So I don't know what RFK would have to do in order to like find himself in that same position. He would have to bend over backwards. He would have to never be perceived as being in Trump's way at all. Because as soon as one news story is out there that like RFK Jr. and Trump are at odds about this, his time is limited. And that's one of the things that Epstein has said about Trump as of these new tapes, is that that Trump would tell him how he was deliberately setting the members of his cabinet against each other, like Steve Bannon and Kellyanne Conway, or, he would have Steve Bannon in his back pocket, but then he would go and tell 10 people that Steve Bannon's a fucking idiot or a piece of shit. And, you know, basically all this chaos that we saw, all this infighting that we saw inside the Trump administration kind of just came from him and how he prefers to deal with people, which is not altogether surprising. But I have no idea how RFK Jr. thinks he would survive in that environment, or like what his fucking game plan is. Like, what is it that you really want to do? You want to like disable all vaccine programs? I mean, that is genuinely frightening. There was somebody who posted a clip the other day of, I can't remember, I guess it must have been Joe Rogan talking to, I don't think RFK, but he was just talking about it. Maybe it was RFK, but they were just talking about how they don't believe that the polio vaccine worked. So like, this isn't just about like the COVID vaccine, mRNA, whatever. It's like, these are people who literally, you know, if it was up to them, the polio vaccine never would have been administered. So, I mean, that is genuinely pretty frightening. But again, I don't feel that threatened by RFK, because I just don't think he would last very long. Even Steve Bannon, I remember when he went into the White House last time, he was like, yeah, I'm going to last a couple months tops. And he was right.
One thing I was thinking about today, with any interview with Donald Trump, by someone who's trying to be challenging, not someone that's just kissing his ass or whatever. But, you know, there are people who push him a little bit and grill him a little bit. I was thinking the last election, especially because that was so close to, you know, all the George Floyd's protest and Black Lives Matter. But still, it's just as relevant today, obviously. Why can't anyone just ask him to straight up say he denounces white supremacy? I've never seen that happen. Maybe it's happened. But, like, just be, you know, they could be very friendly or diplomatic about it. Like, hey, I know you get a reputation as being a racist. I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt that you're not, even though you say all this crazy shit. But can you just right now go on the record and say you denounce white supremacy of any kind? Like, why can't anyone say something like that to him? The closest thing I've seen is where people challenge him with whether he lost or not. And he, like, has never said he hadn't until recently. And then he backpedaled on that. So I don't know why people can't ask those questions. Maybe it is like an agreement ahead of time. Maybe there's certain things they're not allowed to ask. But it feels like if you're saying, don't ask me to denounce white supremacy, it says a lot about you. And I don't know that he says that. I'm sure he probably doesn't. That sounds insane. I just don't know why it doesn't come up. What got me thinking about that was he had done some rally the other day where he was wearing gold and black, like a gold and black MAGA hat and like a black suit with a gold tie. And people were saying that's the Proud Boys colors, and he was like signaling them. And I honestly don't put it past him. It seems a little bit, you know, far conspiracy thing, but I wouldn't put it past him. And like, I don't know, why don't people ask him to denounce the Proud Boys or any of the groups, supporters of his that are openly hate groups? It's like he talks about the radical left when he's talking about, you know, turning the militia and maybe the army on them. But why can't anyone say, what do you acknowledge that there's radical people on the right too? Because, I mean, there clearly is. I mean, everyone who stormed the Capitol on the 6th, it's a big deal. Speaking of like the black and gold signaling to the Proud Boys, I think that very well could be. I've seen a lot of conspiracy theories about him and his campaign signaling different hate groups like that. And I believe they do it sometimes. I think some of the conspiracies go too far. I've seen people say the way his MAGA hat deal is, whereas these days it says 45 and then hyphen 47. So it looks like it's 45 through 47, when really it should be like 45/47 or and 47. But people have said that, oh, that's like him signaling to the QAnon people that believe he's secretly the president that he is, and this would be his third term. And I don't know. Just really kind of off the wall conspiracy stuff like that. And what's weird is that we live in a time where you have to consider that possible. I don't know. Some of the stuff these people believe, I don't understand how we have to contend with those kind of people. The people believe he's like the Epstein tapes, the reason that he's associated with Epstein so much. And you see him on the flight logs and in pictures and at all these events with him. is that he was secretly infiltrating it to try and expose, him. There's people that really believe that stuff, and that's like what we have to contend with. Like, it's kind of crazy in this day and age. It's like the whole flat earther thing. I don't know what's happened with how the internet has opened things up to people to where they can just feed off of each other, these kind of insane things, but it's a really interesting byproduct of all the world's knowledge and communication being linked and everyone having access to it at all times. Totally worth it, but there are some definitely negative and fascinating side effects.
I think the reason that the podcasters like Schultz and whoever else, certainly Joe Rogan, don't directly challenge Trump on the white supremacy thing, like, do you denounce white supremacy? Like, just for the camera. Truthfully, I think he has done that. Trump has sort of been cornered into saying that before. He always talks out of both sides of his mouth about it. But definitely in 2016 and in various moments since then, I do believe that he's been cornered on that, at least enough to say, like, I don't support white supremacists. I don't know anything about white supremacists. I have nothing to do with that. That's always his line. He never, like, really condemns it. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I've heard him say before things like, these people are bad. They're bad for our country. If you remember, it was actually after the Charlottesville thing when he made that famous, very fine people on both sides statement. He made a couple other statements after that. That was one of the few times that his cabinet kind of forced him to apologize for something that he said. And he was furious about that. So he made a couple like wishy-washy statements at that time. Anyway, point being, I think, it's cowardice on the part of these podcasters where it's like the tacit arrangement that they have with Trump is that they're going to have a different kind of conversation than he has with, actual news organizations. And so Trump can walk in there without feeling like he's going to be challenged much. And, rhetorically, Trump is pretty good. As soon as somebody asks him a question like that, he immediately flips to, that's just such a nasty question. Why would you ask me a question like that? Why would you treat me so unfairly? It's unbelievable how unfairly I'm treated. That's a nasty question. That's a nasty question. You're a nasty reporter. He's done that a million times, even in that one interview that he did with, like, it was like a bunch of black panelists, and, like, I don't remember what the organization was, but it was a black themed some kind of event. It was the one where he said the thing about Kamala Harris, only recently she turned black. And that was like, those were some of the first racially incendiary comments that he'd made in a while. He had been reined in up until pretty much that appearance. And what did he say? I think the reason he went off on a diatribe early on that panel is because I think the first question was, why should we believe what you're saying now when you have said all of these racially inflammatory remarks? She repeated some of his remarks and didn't directly ask him to condemn white supremacy or anything, but the question was along the lines of, like, why should we trust you when you have, said all these things in the past, and you've purposely divided us in the past, et cetera, et cetera. And that was his response in that case was, you're nasty, you're a nasty reporter. I like this reporter over here, but this reporter, very unfair to me, very unfair. And it's an interesting reminder of what Trump politics look like, right? Because he immediately sort of, like, castigates them and makes them the enemy and creates that dynamic. And then he also tries to, like, pad it out by making himself, I'm treated very unfairly. And then he also says some of the most shocking things that he said, which at this point almost fall flat. The whole thing about how Kamala Harris goes back and forth between being Indian and black. But it's like, at the time, he really hadn't said anything like that. And so that reporter asking him that question that way sort of incited him into his most Trump. And honestly, that's how we've gotten our most Trump moments, including very fine people on both sides, is some reporter asking him some question that he doesn't like that. And so, these podcasters, they're just cowards. They don't want to do that. That's not the type of content they're trying to make. they don't want to piss the guy off, and so they don't ask any questions like that. But also, to be fair, you know, do you denounce white supremacy? There's probably no question that would piss Trump off more than that, because he has been asked that a million times.
Did you see that thing where the woman in New Jersey was early voting, and she was wearing a Trump shirt, and outside the polling place it clearly said no, you know, political merchandise. And to my recollection, it always has. I think it's always been that way, right? At least everywhere I've voted. But so I think that Trump brings out a lot of first-time voters. So there's people that get really surprised by these things, and she felt like she was being attacked. And so she made a scene, said, "This is why we have to vote him in," or something along those lines. I don't think it was "This is why I'm voting for Trump," or something. She made a scene, and she ripped her shirt off, I guess, and just voted in her bra right then and there, rather than going and changing. Which, you know, hey, good on her, I guess. It seems a little obscene, but I see standing up for what you believe in. But she was just making a scene. It's a little much, right? Like, but I feel like it's these first-time voters. But the thing is, I believe J.D. Vance shared that and said American hero or a real hero or something like that. Like, are you kidding me? That is the guy running for vice president. But, you know, calling her a hero and encouraging that kind of behavior is encouraging a base of voters that don't normally vote, right? I think the numbers before showed that a lot of Trump voters did not actually, or Trump supporters did not actually get out and vote in some areas. And I think this time he's going to be a little better about getting people out, getting those first time or very rare voters out there. So we'll see what happens. But, and so right now it's still looking neck and neck in the polls. But like we were talking about the other week, those are notoriously inaccurate. And the earliest numbers that are going to come in, it's going to go real heavy for the Democrats, right? That's what usually happens, because a lot of the early voting is done by Democrats for whatever reason.
I actually didn't know that you couldn't wear political merchandise when you're voting. I mean, I guess I kind of knew that. I've never, done it. I don't think I've ever owned a piece of political merchandise. But I didn't really know that, so I guess I don't blame that lady for knowing that. That's hilarious that she voted in her bra, though. I respect that. And yeah, I mean, things are probably going to get a little bit weird on election day. I'm expecting it to be worse after election day, but we'll see. I mean, you know, all this stuff about poll watchers and creepy people showing up to polls or not being allowed to be poll watchers, that sort of thing. There's definitely weird stuff that could happen there. So I'm bracing myself for that, and we'll see. But I do think most of the weirdness is going to come in the days after, which is why I think it's really important that the election results are clear either way. Because if there's a clear winner, I have heard somebody say that there's not necessarily going to be a clear winner on the night of election day, which does make me nervous. And, you know, so if there's a clear winner within, let's say, 24 hours, then, you know, there will still be challenges. There will still be weird stuff that comes up, almost certainly. But just the more decisive the victory is on either side, the less time and the less momentum there is going to be behind challenges like that. So I'm gripping onto that hope. It's going to be a weird day for me, man, because I think I'm going to hang out with some friends, at the very beginning of it, right from when the polls close, you know? And then I'm going to work. I'm going to work at 9:30 p.m. But my job is very low pressure, so I'm going to be sitting there watching election coverage probably the whole fucking time. So I'm just going to be there fucking, you know, biting my hands off, trying to see what's going to happen. So I don't know, man. I'm hoping the results are quick and decisive.
So something that has happened to me, and I've heard a couple other friends complain about, I don't know if you've gone through this, is my social media feeds have been flooded with Daily Wire stuff lately, which is really weird. I do have the problem with even if you interact negatively with something, give it a thumbs down or to tell whatever platform you're on to show me less of this or whatever their version of that is, they'll still, it's a negative interaction is considered better than no interaction or whatever engagement, and they'll still put stuff like that in your feed. But it seems like the Daily Wire, I'm sure because just the last week before the election, or it was, put a lot of money out to do these sponsorships. But even I was doing all that thing of trying to say, show me less of this, I don't want to see this ad. And I used to, in a like sick schadenfreude way, would watch summaries of the Daily Wire productions online, laugh at how horrible they are. I stopped doing that though. It just started being sad. So I don't know much about it, but I'll see like ads with like Joe Rogan praising it. I don't know, man. I don't know why I'm being shown all this stuff. The algorithm is a harsh mistress.
Daily Wire is one of the best examples of just essentially astroturfing, I guess, but just dumping millions of dollars into advertising, and they've been doing this for a long time. That's really how Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire has become ubiquitous. You know, that's in the last few years that they've become like a legitimate media company. But in reality, like a lot of that was from Facebook and Facebook ads. It's an example of how effective Facebook ads can be, especially if you dump millions of dollars into it. But I think Ben Shapiro has invested in that so much that he has some kind of partnership with Facebook where they, you know, whatever amount he gives them for advertising, it's like he's one of their core advertising partners, I think, specifically on Meta or Facebook or whatever. And so, you know, I mean, it's really worked in his case in terms of propping up this media organization, and it's very much the Koch method of, meaning the Koch brothers, their method of, if you use exorbitant amounts of wealth to prop up your ideas in various aspects of society, various vectors of society, then over time you're spending all of your money to do that, and you need billions of dollars to do it. But over time, you get the return on investment with political things like tax cuts, overturning of Roe versus Wade, etc. It's a theory that they figured out last century in terms of like how to go about planting the seeds of conservative ideology. So Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro are 100% just another link in that chain. And I mean, honestly, the money that's going into their advertising now is almost certainly from the same exact sources that is pushing Koch brothers propaganda for the last 30, 40 years. It's the same people. You know, Ben Shapiro is bankrolled by those same people. And also, did you hear about the whole tenant media thing with people like Tim Pool and Dave Rubin and a couple other right-wing commentators, where it was like they were having money funneled directly to them from Russia, literally from Russia, to this company called Tenant Media that was licensing Tim Pool's content, Dave Rubin's content, paying them stupid amounts of money, basically, you know, to do the type of propaganda that they do. And this shit was coming like directly from creepy Russian oligarch sources. And the DOJ like uncovered this and kind of told them about it. And so now, like, basically the music stopped on a lot of that right-wing media. I mean, these are people who are hooked up with The Blaze and maybe the Daily Wire. I think at least one person from the Daily Wire, although I don't want to cast that aspersion. Certainly it's the same network of people. But yeah, so there's definitely creepy money going into those media organizations. And, you know, once that money stops going in, then all of a sudden it's like, maybe it's not as profitable as we thought to make straight up right-wing propaganda. And that's what I was saying about Tim Pool, is that I think he might be trying to change his tone a little bit, because I think he's realizing that like building his entire business model off of receiving money like that is you know, it comes with some downsides. So I'm interested to see if Tim Pool makes some kind of pivot here. I feel like that might be what he's trying to do. Oh, and also I read a little bit about the guy who supposedly brought in Tony Hinchcliffe. I think it was probably that same Atlantic article. But it was actually like one of these little like right-wing online grifter types, like a fucking Groyper type of guy, you know, because they have all these young staffers that are sort of in those coffers of the internet, and every now and then they make some call like that bubbles up to the top. So it was some guy like that, young guy, I can't remember who in the campaign he was associated with, but he's just you know, one of their little young Hitler Youth guys. And he apparently was the one that wanted Trump to be on Kill Tony, and he has a wide network, I think, within right-wing media, and I guess some of that extends to the podcasting and stuff. And I think that he is also the one that was like orchestrating some of those podcast appearances and stuff like that. So it's yet another example of how they welcome people like that on board, these little 4chan Nazis, and then, you know, they're like, they sabotage Trump out of stupidity. They think it's good strategy. You know what I mean? Like, I guarantee you, literally up until the media backlash started, that dude thought having Tony Hinchcliffe on, you know, at a Trump rally was genius. And, you know, to, you know, give credit where it's due, it's like, I don't think I would have thought of it as a particularly bad move either. It really just comes back to the fact that Tony said the exact wrong things at the exact wrong time. And it really just is hilarious how bad strategy-wise that, like, online right-wing grifter stuff tends to be. And, you know, the Trump people go for it every time. I mean, despite the fact that it was some random within the campaign who brought Tony in, you know, they apparently all like, they signed off on his jokes and everything. Like, they were well aware of what he was going to say, and it just didn't cross the radar as being something that he shouldn't say. So really, overall, just a brilliant moment up and down. But yeah, man, that Groyper shit worked in 2016, but I don't think it's working anymore. I guess we'll find out.